if a brand designs, produces, and markets and sells a product the first time around, the new product, it completely loses the control of any subsequent resale.
Welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 37, and today's guest is Adam Siegel. Adam is an entrepreneur building a business called Recurate, a branded re-commerce startup. Formerly, he was SVP of Innovation, Research, and Sustainability at the Retail Industry Leaders Association, where he led RILA's Retail Innovation Center and Retail Sustainability Initiative. His role at RILA was to accelerate the next phase of innovation and growth for traditional consumer brands and to enhance the industry's sustainability and ethical sourcing practices. Before we get started, a quick thank you, as always, to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by Adam Siegel, CEO and founder of Recurate. Adam, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Mark.
My pleasure. Thanks for making the time. I know as an early stage company founder, you must be pretty busy these days.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot to do, but I'm always excited to have these conversations. I have a lot of respect for the audience that you've built and had a chance to listen to a number of your past podcasts. So I just feel honored to be a part of that.
Well, thank you very much. We are recording this the end of May. Looks like we are slowly but surely getting back to some semblance of normalcy. How are you and your family doing?
We're doing all right. We had our first child just a week before COVID, and so our life was disrupted even without a pandemic. But excited to get back to normal so that he can get to know his grandparents better and we can spend more time with some of his friends.
Oh, that's nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
One of the things we like to do when we get this show started, and you mentioned something to me as before we got started about not wanting to talk about yourself, but hey, you come on a podcast, you have to talk about yourself just a little bit. Tell us what that that Adam Siegel first story is. Where did you grow up? Is there anything in your early childhood that might have suggested that you would have gotten a business off the ground like you have?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You don't tend to get that very often in your career. I was very lucky, raised by 2 fantastic parents, who valued education. I grew up outside of the DC area in a relatively affluent area where education was a priority. And so, I was set in a life direction that was probably pretty easy from the beginning. I was the type of kid that loved building things and exploring, and my parents would probably describe me as the kid that would take apart the vacuum cleaner just to figure out how it works. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, when computers and the internet were first becoming a thing, I took that same mentality towards the digital world. I was in the basement with our first family computer, just playing around, learning programming languages, learning the internet. I was always very entrepreneurial, though I don't think I would have described myself in that way. It was just about building things. So I had a few websites that were mildly successful for a middle schooler and a high schooler, and I think I've just continued to have that bug since.
That's great. Well, I think that the building of things had something to do with what you wound up studying in school, but we'll come back to that. You and I met. Actually, we have not physically met, as many of us have not these days. But I heard you give a presentation through an organization called Xrc Labs. Tell us a little bit about Xrc Labs. I have interviewed for the podcast Pano. Maybe that's one of the ones that you had the opportunity to listen to. But tell us about XRC.
Yeah, XRC was great, especially for the stage that we were at the time we went through the program. The short of it is that they're a retail tech startup accelerator. I actually knew them from my previous role at Rela. Part of what I did was build and lead our innovation program. And so I was sort of on the other side of the table, if you want to think about it like that, from the corporate side, trying to learn about the retail tech landscape when XRC started about 5 years ago. But from the side that I'm at now, as an entrepreneur, they, again, felt very lucky that they admitted me to their program. They provide a small amount of funding, but really it's about the support. And so you go through an 8-week program. For me, it was all virtual because it was during the pandemic, but usually it would be in person in New York. Where you get to meet with a cohort of peer startups and entrepreneurs and access XRC's diverse network of mentors, brands, and executives. We went through that program towards the end of last year, 2020, but still I find myself in touch with folks at XRC, almost on a daily, certainly a weekly basis.
Yeah, I've had really good experience. I've mentioned this on the show before. I started, I think they were in their first or second cohort, and I was lucky enough to be, a mentor, and have met a lot of good people. And it certainly seems that they provide a lot of good value to people like you. So that's great. We'll come back to your business, but were they helpful in fundraising for you?
Well, I'll say that when we were going through the program, fundraising was not really on our mind. We had closed a pre-seed round of 500K shortly before the program started, and that was going to last us through the middle of this year. So it wasn't on our mind. But interestingly, as with all accelerator programs, the very last thing that you do is a demo day. And I think, Mark, that's where you must have heard my session. Leading up to that demo day and after that demo day, I got a lot of inbound interest from investors. And that ultimately catalyzed in us closing a seed round much earlier than we had initially anticipated. So I think there is a direct relationship between having gone through the program and being able to close that most recent round.
Yeah. Well, honestly, having that is where I saw you, and I thought your presentation was good. It was compelling. The only mistake I made was not, I did reach out to you. I remember introducing myself. The only mistake I made was not saying, "Hey, how can I give you some money?" During that fundraise. But who knows? Maybe there'll be another fundraise where I'll be able to participate.
I'm sure we can find a chance. It's hard to pass up when people want to give you money.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to college. So you were at University of Illinois, aerospace engineering. So that, I guess it's a little bit different than taking apart that vacuum cleaner you were talking about. Talk about that experience, and then, bring us into the MIT experience.
Well, University of Illinois was actually for a master's in aerospace. I did get an undergrad in mechanical and aero from another college, Worcester Polytech in Central Mass. So, I think getting into aerospace was kind of the budding of a childhood dream, and maybe this is every boy's dream. When they look up and see planes and stars, they think, I want to build something that can get people there. I studied aero. Interestingly, for what it's worth, while I was at University of Illinois, I was on the team that built the first satellite that came out of the University of Illinois, and it exploded on a rocket above Russia. So we never got to see it working. But at that time, I had started thinking more about getting into business. And so I took a couple of classes in business. When recruiters came from consulting firms, I took a few interviews, not really knowing anything about the business world or how my experience might relate to it, but I just saw it as an opportunity and started opening the door at that point.
And then the MIT experience, I found this really interesting because you had a program around sustainability, and again, as part of a number of the shows that I've done here with brands like Thousand Fell and Fair Harbor that are both very engaged in the world of sustainability. So explain the MIT work that you did.
Yeah, well, first, that's when I began getting into sustainability. That was 2007 when I entered their MBA program. Frankly, I didn't know anything about sustainability. Sustainability was already a thing at that point, corporate sustainability or corporate social responsibility. Brands like Nike pioneering the space. Walmart had just announced their big sustainability program, which has continued to blossom over the past 15 years or so. So it's not like the industry or that field didn't exist, but it was at its very early stages. I actually read a book just before applying to grad school called Cradle to Cradle. And that was the trigger moment for me. And I even remember going back to my business school essays and almost doing a find replace, for the question that asks, what do you want to be once you graduate? I wrote originally aerospace executive, even though I knew I didn't want to be that. It just felt like the right story. And I replaced that with sustainability executive. While I was in the MIT Sloan program, the couple-year program, I just dove as deep as I could into sustainability. I got a few projects. I interned at Environmental Defense Fund. They have a corporate partnership program, and at the time they were just launching one with KKR, and took as many classes as I could. There weren't a whole lot of students that were thinking about sustainability or cared much about it, but there were a few, and so we built a community of students. And there were 4 professors in particular that were very focused on sustainability. They had just started one class, but I took all of their classes, even if they weren't purely focused on sustainability. And I felt like by the end, I had a pretty good understanding of the field and the role I could play in it.
That's really interesting. And that's pretty early on. You think about, how much has changed in the 14 or 15 years, since. And it feels from, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's only because I'm paying more attention to it. It really only feels like 3 or 4 years where apparel and accessories are becoming a bigger piece of or more focused on sustainability.
Yeah, I'd say now that I've been working in and around the field of sustainability for almost 15 years, I'd say it's really only in the last 5 years, but maybe even more in the last 2, where I've noticed a transformation in the way both brands and consumers are talking about sustainability. Even the most mainstream brands, outside of the ones that were built on sustainable values like Thousand Fell, are talking about sustainability in a very strategic way. And to me, that feels like an evolution relative to how it was even just 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent 7 years running the e-commerce business at Steve Madden. And just very recently, Madden came out with a sustainable line of products, and they've gone into it in a big way. It's not just a few products; it's many products. They've done great marketing behind it. So I guess we'll be seeing, even more of that. And like I said, I mentioned about Thousand Fell and Fair Harbor. They have clearly found their niche. And consumers are following them and buying their products. So it's good news. We have quite a lot of listeners here who might be early in their career, and so you came out of your master's and then you took your first job. What might you have as words of wisdom for somebody who's going from school into their first job, maybe post pandemic, where it's not that they're working from home remotely, they're going to an office. What might you want to share about that first job?
My most general advice, and this is very general, is listen and learn. There's so much we all don't know about the world or the working world or specific projects or companies. I still feel that way, but certainly when I reflect on my 21-year-old self, there was a lot that I did not know. And I remember one particular situation I think garnered a lot of respect on my behalf. So I was doing consulting, and there was one point where we were in a meeting with our client. They asked us to develop a new product using a specific language. It doesn't matter what, a programming language. My job wasn't even programming, but they just asked about it. And they asked if I would know how to do that. And I said, no, not yet. And I think they really appreciated that. It was just kind of my mentality is just baked into who I am, that you can do anything. You just have to put yourself to it. Listen, really try to understand the context of the people you're working with, the organization, the types of projects, and be willing to learn.
Good advice. So 8 years at what you referred to as RELA, the Retail Industry Leaders Association. Tell our listeners what that is. And, some of the things that you did there were really interesting, kind of the early days of aggressive mobile shopping, some 3D printing, things, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, I had two roles there over the course of my 8 years. That was after business school, where I was just hell-bent on getting a job in sustainability. And ultimately I did, and it ended up being my dream job for the time. So when I was hired in, my responsibility was to build and lead their first sustainability and ethical production program. So at that point in 2010, Walmart had already announced their sustainability program. Target was building theirs. There were people in, sustainable leadership roles across the industry. Companies like CVS, Walgreens, Nike, Abercrombie, Levi's, they all had sustainability programs at that point, different levels of maturity. And so as an association that represents retailers and brands like that, the trade association felt like it was also their mission to raise the bar as an industry. I was very lucky that this is a progressive trade association, and so they gave me the reins to build a program that was truly valued and was pushing the limits. The types of collaborations that I facilitated were around issues like energy reduction in stores, renewable energy generation. We actually spun out an organization that helps promote better policies at a state level for renewable energy generation, waste reduction and recycling, engaging landlords, because often the retailers don't own their space, so they need to work directly with their landlords, the retail developers. So that was on the environmental side. Circular economy was a theme that had grown towards the end of my time there, and we'll obviously get to that with Recurate. But then on the ethical production side, I led collaborations on conflict minerals, worker safety, human trafficking, and a number of other issues. Had a chance to visit factories in China, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere, and really get to understand what it takes to produce product from a human perspective. So that was my first role, sustainability and ethical production. The second was, given how much was changing in the industry, especially around 2013, I built and led the association's first innovation and emerging technology program. That was fascinating as well for very different reasons. But around that time, these companies were hiring chief innovation officers. They were opening innovation labs in Silicon Valley. They were partnering with VCs and accelerators and startups and hosting hackathons. It was a period of 1,000 flowers blooming. Nobody really knew what was going to make them successful for the future, but they knew they needed to do something. And so my role there was to work closely with those executives, the ones that were leading transformative change, bring them out to the Bay Area and New York, have them meet with VCs and startups and visit some stores that were employing some interesting new technologies. For me, that was also personally transformative because it gave me the opportunity to explore for myself where the industry was going.
Good stuff. I mean, that sounds like a really interesting role. So that's great. It seems like you took a lot away from that. Thanks for sharing. Do you have a direct-to-consumer business? I enjoy connecting with guests on this podcast because it reminds me what I love to do: strategic and tactical consulting for businesses like yours. If you'd like to speak with me about your business and see how you can add a fresh set of eyes to your team, contact me at mark@detailsinteractive.com. Now, let's get back to the marketing playbook. All right, so let's talk about Recurate. So you had all this, leading up. You had some experience, in innovation. You had the sustainability path, and then Recurate. So tell us first what Recurate is, and then we'd love to hear the story behind how you got it up and running.
So we're a software integration that integrates directly with brands' e-commerce websites. And we enable a very streamlined experience for your customers, which is to allow them to resell products that they previously purchased from you directly on your website. So you can imagine, whereas right now they have to go to Poshmark to sell an item, now they can go back to you, to the brand's site, list that item for sale, and it gets listed directly on their site and can be sold directly on the brand's site. It's an idea that seems like its time has come because there's been a lot of interest from brands, and we're lucky that we're able to ride that wave of interest and grow along with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm going to ask you a line of questions, and they're going to sound like I'm challenging its efficacy. Not my intention, just trying to, pull out from you, if you were selling to me, if I was operating a brand, it would be the kinds of questions that I might ask. And for all the folks out there that have worked with me on the provider side, they're going to say, there's Friedman again, asking all the questions. What's the play from the brand's perspective, right? What's your pitch to them about why they want to do this? Is it about margin? Is it about controlling the product availability of this product? What's the hook, do you think?
Different brands see it differently, but I think the biggest hook is really around loyalty, which entails customer reacquisition, bringing customers back to the brand, as well as new customer acquisition. And so to be more specific, the way I think about it now is that if a brand designs, produces, and markets and sells a product the first time around, the new product, it completely loses the control of any subsequent resale. And to me, it just feels like a waste. Like, great, you produce that one product. Why don't you benefit from the second, third, fourth, fifth sale of that product? And so right now, if I have something that I want to resell, I have to go to Poshmark or The RealReal or ThreadUp or eBay to list it on their site. And the brand that originally produced that item doesn't know who that customer is, much less are they benefiting from the transaction. And so Recurate is a way to bring that customer back to their site, reacquire them. When the item sells, there's an opportunity to give them store credit for the sale, in which case you're keeping that customer with you. And in the meantime, you can offer a product at a lower price point to attract a different type of customer that you wouldn't have been able to attract otherwise.
Customer acquisition. Let's talk about, I have so many questions. Integrations, platform agnostic.
Yeah, we're platform agnostic. When we first launched, we were solely for Shopify, but now we're working with brands on Shopify, of course, Salesforce. We're talking with brands on Magento and custom platforms. And so our tech architecture can integrate with a brand on any site.
When you talk with brands, potential brands, and I want to get back to in a second how you think about the brands that are potentials for this, do some view it as a just potential cannibalization of the new products that they're bringing to market?
We very rarely get that question from brands. And it's interesting because when I first started this business, I assumed that would be the number one question. And also, interestingly, the most recent time that we did get it was just yesterday. But besides that, it's very rare that we hear this question from brands. If I reflect on why I think people are not asking this question, it's because they know that their business is already being cannibalized because it's no secret that if you want to buy used, there are places to go. You can just go to Poshmark, and that's what's happening already today. The question really is not about, are we cannibalizing? That's already happening. It's just happening off of your platform. The question really is, do we want to control the experience and own that customer, or do we want to give that customer away to Poshmark?
So cannibalize yourself before somebody cannibalizes you.
It's already happening. Others are already cannibalizing these brand sales. And
Yeah.
especially, just to add, especially with the pandemic now, brands are redoubling their efforts in e-commerce. They want as many channels as possible to attract customers to their site, into their marketing funnel, rather than going somewhere else. And so this is a great opportunity, even for brands, or maybe even especially for brands that are primarily wholesale, because they don't know who's purchased their product in the past, but this provides a channel for them to find those people and invite them to resell their pre-loved items, in which case they can then add those customers, the sellers, to their marketing funnels.
And so if I'm the brand and somebody wants to resell Mark's the brand Mark, a shirt that they bought from me, are they taking the photography, they're doing the image much like they would do on any of these other resale platforms and uploading it into my site through your tool?
You can think of it like a product listing form, similar to Poshmark, where all the information about the product, except in our case, because we're directly integrated with the brand's product catalog, we have a whole lot of information about that product, which means you don't have to enter it. Our goal is to significantly reduce the friction for listing a product, and we can do that because we complete 80% of the listing on the seller's behalf. All they need to do is add a couple of pictures of the product today, tell us the condition of the item. We recommend a sale price, which is also a point of friction on third-party sites. But again, because we have so much data about products, we can make a price recommendation. And then we ask them to add a little bit of a description, and they're done. It's a very straightforward listing process.
And what information, or maybe the better question is, how do you determine that the shirt that I'm giving you the picture of is in fact something that was from Mark's brand?
Primarily, customers are listing items directly from their purchase history. So we have access to the brand's order history because we're integrated with their e-com site. If I had a Marks shirt, I wanted to sell it, I would go to marks.com, I would log in, see my order history, find the shirt that I wanted to sell, click that sell button, and then complete the rest of the information. So for the most part, we're finding that a lot of the listings are coming directly from the purchase history, which then, guarantees that they own that item. That said, I did mention that a lot of the brands that we're working with are wholesale brands, and so they don't have the purchase history for individual customers. So we do give those people an option as well, but we have an approval process where we get to review their listing and confirm the shirt is the accurate shirt. At that point, we also match it up with the brand's product imagery and descriptions. So the listing at the end of the day will be complete, but there is that check in place.
And I would imagine that you'd have a similar kind of an issue. Many retailers, that have physical retail as well as web, their point of sale transactions are not flowing into a customer's account, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. And we actually can import order data. So if you have two different systems that haven't previously talked to one another, we can extract the data from any of those systems and import it into ours to kind of supplement. But if that data is lost, or if that data had never existed with the brand, then we can still allow customers to list from outside of their history.
And are brands concerned about the imagery that being, look, especially in fashion brands, they go to great lengths to style models and have it be, have it look like the brand, and being consistent. And now you got Mark out there who's, taking a picture, throwing it up on a hanger on a door. It's not going to the same look and feel.
Absolutely. So I'd say we're working with over 20 brands right now, and there's definitely a spectrum. So some are very lenient about the types of products, the imagery that gets uploaded. And I think the rationale there is that they have very strong communities and they actually like the diversity of images. So, I often see pictures of women wearing the dresses that they're selling and describing the parties that they went to and stuff like that. And I feel like that adds to the community orientation of those particular brands. But then there are other brands that, no surprise, are very stringent about the types of images or just user content that appears on their site, and that's because they have a brand reputation to protect. In fact, one of the brands that we launched with literally just today is called Redone, premium denim brand. I love the brand. It's a very fast growing D2C brand. They have a very particular aesthetic. And so we actually worked with them to develop an image enhancement process. So if you send us images, we will remove the background, replace it with Redone's color background, a light gray background. We'll add shadows to it. We'll orient the image and we'll do a bit of color enhancement. And so you'll see that even though they're seller images, they look very on brand. It's pretty cool. So anyway, we launched for sellers today, and then I think we'll be launching for buyers to be able to buy pre-loved Redones within a week.
Would you say that, certain brands, this just doesn't play well for in the sense, I mean, look, nothing works for everybody, but, do you think this needs to be a brand that, has some heritage and people are really going to want a resale of an item? I don't want to call out any brands as examples because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but, there are just certain brands out there that are generic. You can buy a product like it forever. It could be a Dum Dum t-shirt. It could be whatever. Some of those things just don't seem like they're going to play.
Yeah, I think brand matters. The brands that we first launched with, frankly, the ones that we're still launching with today have fiercely loyal communities. It's not that those customers are buying just any brand. Those customers are constantly on the brand's website and in the brand's Facebook group and interacting with other customers. There might already be a buy-sell trade community for that brand. Could have formed organically even outside of the brand's control, but it's just because the community is so strong that they self-formed. So I do think those are the early adopters because that's where this behavior is already happening. But I actually have been surprised by the diversity of brands that we're now working with that all have successful programs, from higher price point women's wear brands to lower price point, very seasonal Gen Z brands that maybe you would consider to be fast fashion type brands. We're launching soon with luxury footwear. We're already on a number of apparel sites, gear like camera equipment, travel equipment. I mean, such a diversity of product categories. Whereas when we initially envisioned this idea, we were thinking very narrowly. It turns out that there's a whole lot of brands and categories for which this does work well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Talk about the revenue model here. So it's kind of a three-party transaction. It feels like I've got the brand, you've got the person who's trying to sell it, and then you guys are in the middle. So how does that work?
At the end of the day, our goal is to give the brands as much control as they want. Our integration is completely configurable. And what that means with regard to the financials is that every brand is deciding for themselves what methods to offer for payout, store credit and/or cash. No surprise, every brand offers store credit because they want to keep the customer. Only some of the brands that we're working with right now offer cash. But then also give the brand the option to determine how much to pay out in store credit and/or cash. Most of the brands that we're working with pay out 100% in credit. And for the ones that offer cash, they're paying out, say, 70 or 80%. So that then dictates the cut that both the seller gets as well as what the brand gets. For Recurate, Being in the middle, we do take a cut of every transaction. It's dependent on the specifics of the brand, the volume, the customer support needs, and things like that.
You talked a little bit about fundraising. One of the most consistent things that I hear from people like you that get involved in building a business, they say, geez, I knew that there were going to be a lot of things that I didn't know. I knew there were going to be a lot of things that were going to be tough, but the most difficult thing was fundraising. How did that go for you? It sounds like maybe a little bit that you fell into some luck. I don't want to say you fell into it, but you know what I mean. It came to you, as you said.
Well, I will say I feel lucky or fortunate. We're building a concept that's idea has come. And so for that reason, we were getting a lot of interest from investors. In particular, I kept hearing several themes between those calls, in terms of their investment thesis, and we tended to align with a few of those themes. One was about e-commerce enablement, the services and products that can enable e-commerce generally are being prioritized for investment. The second is sustainability. There seem to be a whole lot of investment dollars out there for sustainability right now. And given that ThreadUp, The RealReal, and Poshmark IPO'd relatively recently, and they're now billion-dollar companies, they've proven out the resale model. So the third theme that I would hear a lot about specifically was resale or re-commerce. We play right in the middle of all of those, and I think that is a fortunate position to be in, because it meant a lot of investors are still reaching out to us. I think also I feel very lucky that I have the added benefit of having worked at Reala in a role where I got to know very closely a number of VCs in the retail tech ecosystem. So that gave me a step ahead.
That's great. Congratulations on this success that you've been able to garner so far. Really nice story. So we're at the end of the show. We do this 2-minute drill, 1-word answers. You ready?
I don't know if I can do 1-word answers.
All right, we'll give you two or three. How's that? A brand that you admire or that inspires you?
Redone. For those that don't know it, I hope you look at it. It's a great brand.
Favorite app on your phone?
My podcast app. Love podcasts.
Oh, there you go. That's good. The last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
Peak Designs Marketplace. It's hard to ask me this question because now I have so many brands that I can shop from using Recurate, but Peak Design.
Something that you're not good at, but that you wish that you were?
Related brand marketing and visual aesthetic.
Charitable organization that you're passionate about?
Very much the Environmental Defense Fund.
Okay, sticking with that environment. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Being able to sleep well with a newborn.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm way past newborns and I don't sleep well. So I'm not sure what that's going to say for you for the future. Other than family, what's your most prized possession?
For working in retail and consumer products, I'm not a very material person, but I love the outdoors, and I have this Gregory backpack that I've had for the last 20 years, gone around the world with it several times, and many a nights camping.
Very nice. Adam, where can people reach out to you on social media should they have any questions and want to learn more about your company?
Just search for me on LinkedIn, but you can also find me on Twitter at Recurate.
Hey, Adam, great to see you. Thanks so much for the good conversation. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Adam Siegel for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, listen and learn. That's good advice for all of us, but particularly for those just getting started in their careers. Take on anything and everything that people are willing to throw at you, even if you do not know quite yet how to do it. Make yourself invaluable by demonstrating that can-do attitude. Number 2, cannibalize your business before others do it to you. Adam noted that there are already many companies that have proven the concept of resale. This is certainly not for all brands, but if your products are already being sold in a secondary market, why not consider having your customers do it as part of your ecosystem? And number 3, the circular economy is seemingly here to stay. Sustainability is a key to many businesses' core strategies these days. Are you playing in this space? And if not, what can you be doing to support these types of initiatives? Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at @DetailsInteract and learn more at detailsinteractive.com. Until next time, the devil is in the details.